Shortly after posting my video about Star vs. the Force of Evil, I was contacted by a person who had a history working on the cartoons I've mentioned on this channel. Several years ago, due to a personal disagreement with one of the big players in the industry, and perhaps in part due to this person not sharing their political views with them, my source was effectively blacklisted from many of the animation studios working today, and has had people from within them deliberately sabotage projects and career opportunities for them by discouraging others from working with them, and by spreading fabricated rumors about them when simply asking people not to work with them didn't work. This individual had come across some of my videos and decided to share some of their own insights into the incestuous nature of the Western cartoon industry. To keep the anonymity of my source, we agreed that I will not play the actual audio of the interview we conducted to avoid them being recognized. Instead, I will be retelling the relevant information from the 3-hour discussion we had in my own words. I've confirmed that this person is indeed who they say they are, however, I have no way of confirming the things I was told by them are true, so just keep that in mind. All I can promise is that the following is an honest and accurate account of what I was told by them. You'll have to decide on your own whether you believe it or not. Everything I'm about to divulge here should be prefaced with the word allegedly. So where do we begin? I guess a good place to start would be Pendleton Ward, the man behind Adventure Time, and the person who my source singled out as perhaps the progenitor of most everything wrong with the state of the American cartoon industry, specifically Cartoon Network and Disney TVA. Now, rewind to 2010. Ward's series Adventure Time has been greenlit by Cartoon Network. Now, he needs to hire a team he'd direct. But instead of hiring professionals, Penn decides he'll just hire his friends from CalArts without bothering to test or screen them in any way. This results in a failure so miserable that the studio ends up having to fire nearly everyone, which explains why the first season of the show looks like complete shit and probably explains also why it sounded completely awful. In the end, the only remaining members of the original crew were Sam Valet, who got promoted to storyboard artist despite spending 90% of his workday sleeping in the office, and Ken Osborne, who is rumored to have allegedly once whipped his dick out in the middle of a staff meeting for an unknown reason. Clearly, it was an all-star crew. Now, you'd think Penn would have learned something from this, about, I don't know, hiring people who are actually qualified, but no. Again, when it came time to replace everyone, instead of, again, hiring industry professionals, this time Penn had an even more brilliant idea. He would hire comic artists and general artists from Tumblr who have a large following, hoping that their fans would watch his show and thus boost the viewership of Adventure Time. This, incidentally, is how Rebecca Sugar came to work in the industry. From here, things went from bad to worse, as, unfortunately for Ward, he's a complete pushover. He has no control over his employees and no real interest in gaining control over them. He focused more on throwing drawing parties at his house to make him seem cool and popular with his new friends than he did with, actually directing them and telling them how to do their job. To help him do this, Ward instituted a nearly supervision-free board-driven system of writing for the show. See, the system worked like this. The directors would give the storyboard artists an outline of the episode's plot, and then let them just do whatever they want. Whatever they want in this case meant that now, each storyboard artist, few of whom knew how to actually write in the first place, let alone while cooperating with other people, would each pull the plot in different directions, using the freedom allotted to them to write their own personal issues into the show and add more and more plot lines that the show ended up never actually resolving. The constantly changing staff, lack of communication between the artists, unwillingness by any of them to confront the other artist when they came up with bad ideas, and a lack of a guiding hand to keep things on track and tell people no, meant that no one really knew where the show was going at any given time, and both Adventure Time and subsequent similar shows suffered from an unprofessional and toxic work environment where much of the day is wasted on petty bickering and ideological one-upmanship between the staff members over who racks up more oppression points. This was in fact so bad that one of the people working on Adventure Time publicly confirmed that the gay kiss at the end of the last episode was not part of the original script and was, in reality, the independent decision of a single storyboard artist who was randomly assigned to draw that sequence. And for the record, my source told me that these sorts of things may be considered acceptable at Cartoon Network and Disney TVA, but in other studios he's worked with that are roughly the same size, this sort of work environment and these sort of practices are almost unheard of. When he worked at more professional studios, he told me that he experienced a mostly professional work environment with an engaged supervisor, pre-planned stories, and a clear allocation of duties resulting in a better show with a coherent plot. Eventually, unable to handle the stress of actual work, Ward just threw up his hands and cashed out, effectively leaving the show in the hands of Adam Muto. Then again, maybe Ward was just running while he still could before he got busted again for constantly stealing shit. And we're not talking about office supplies here, we're talking about intellectual property. You see, Ward has some pretty sticky fingers when it comes to other people's ideas. And most of what shows up on Adventure Time is just stuff that he saw online and thought to himself, shit, that looks cool, I guess I'll take it. For example, the staring horse from episode 28 he ripped off directly from Kate Baden's Hark a Vagrant. And in fact, the show's entire art style is rumored to have been lifted from somewhere else, possibly an anime show called Kaiba, which explains why they had one of Kaiba's directors as a guest director of one of the episodes. But the greatest of these little heists, however, was the time he stole a character from a retarded child. You see, at some point, a kid that might have been retarded or autistic sent a drawing of a fan character he made up to Ward, and Ward just put it in the show, without asking anyone. The studio eventually found out about this somehow and scrambled to retroactively fabricate a character creation contest so they can announce this kid as the winner. Although the parents still found out since they never entered anything into any contest and their kid couldn't have done it himself, so the studio ended up having to still quietly pay them off to avoid a lawsuit. Ironically enough, the character itself, MeMow, is very possibly a ripoff of Killer Queen from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Killer Queen 第3の爆弾バイツァーダスト Now, the important part of all of this is that because Adventure Time was so successful, and because the people involved and their friends ended up working on or creating other shows, thanks to either nepotism or studios hoping to make lightning strike twice, everything that Pendleton Ward did, from hiring from Tumblr to drawing in the CalArts sausage mouth style, was copied by his successors and proteges. So now, thanks to him, the animation industry's new standards are for showrunners to hire their friends and people off of the internet without qualifications or any kind of oversight. The way that the shows are written creates incoherent plots with more plot holes than Pennacotta Fugo's suit. I'm sorry, I let my friend proofread my script and she put a bunch of JoJokes in here. Anyway, pretty much all the things I suspected about the shows I talked about in previous videos were pretty much absolutely right. So let's see how this comes into play in one of those shows. It's time we talked about Steven Universe. Again. Like I said, Rebecca Sugar got her job because Ward found her on Tumblr and hired her because she had a large following there. And since Sugar copied everything she learned working with Ward right down to using Tumblr as a help wanted ad, because of this, the writing and storyboarding of the show is just as messy and unsupervised as that of Adventure Time, leading to much of the same results. And while my source is no lawyer, they told me that from their interactions with the people involved, they believe that, just as I suspected, Steven Universe is actively written the way that it is because they're trying to avoid hiring men. They also confirmed that Ian Jones-Quartey probably got his job because he was Sugar's boyfriend. Speaking of which, Quartey, who now also has his own show, possibly thanks to Sugar, may be trying to do the same thing with OKKO, but without much success since his show doesn't have a good excuse to hire women to voice male characters. Now, in addition to confirming all the things I already know, my source did tell me a few other things that I think you'll find interesting. One aspect of the show that a lot of people were surprised I didn't touch on in my original video was the Steven bombs. The bizarre airing schedule where episodes will be aired in batches in between hiatuses, sometimes lasting up to 6 months. At the time, if I had brought it up, I would have assumed that it was the result of the crew being lazy and Cartoon Network having an awful management that can't keep their employees in line. But it turns out that that's not really the case. The Steven bombs exist to hide the show's abysmal ratings. See, it works like this. When the show was airing regularly, the ratings were bad and declining fast, and Cartoon Network knew that they'd be forced to cancel the show if it keeps up the way that it was. They also knew that firing the first female showrunner in their history and admitting that hiring women, hiring Sugar, was a mistake. That wouldn't be very progressive of them, and they didn't want to deal with the potential backlash. So instead, they came up with this. You see, every time a Steven bomb drops, the ratings spike due to the anticipation and the short flash-in-the-pan nature of dumping a handful of episodes in one shot. And those seemingly arbitrary time gaps in between bombs, they're the result of the network looking for good time slots to air this shit when nothing else is on, so they don't have to compete, because if Steven Universe aired against anything halfway watchable, everyone would just change the channel. So combine all these factors together, and if you only look at the raw numbers, it looks like this show is doing gangbusters and they can keep Sugar employed while pretending someone wants to watch this shit. That's not to say that Rebecca herself is valuable or powerful within Cartoon Network, because as much as she likes to brag about how tough she is when facing the higher-ups, and even claims on her podcast that the gay kiss in a recent episode was the result of her standing up to the studio and demanding it, the truth is, according to my source, is that this is almost definitely a complete lie, and she was probably only able to slip it into the episode because no one noticed, just like everything else she puts in the show, because Cartoon Network has no standards and practices department the way that Disney does and probably should get one. In fact, let's take a quick detour here. One bad trend that started even before word got into the industry was cartoons sneaking gay kisses into the last episode of the show, because once it airs, it's too late for them to get in trouble with the network or get fired over this. They then pretend retroactively that they got the green light on this from the studio and that this was the corporation giving off a sign of allyship to the agenda that they're pushing. In reality, of course, like I said, in Adventure Time it was snuck in by one of the storyboard artists. The same is true with Legend of Korra, because Nickelodeon has a very small S&P department, and the creators even admitted that they slipped this under the radar. Disney's S&P division, by contrast, threatened to cancel an entire episode of Gravity Falls when Alex Hirsch tried to put a gay kiss in it, but he still managed to sneak it in, of course as usual, into the last episode. Now, Napsy claimed that Disney gave her the go-ahead to put a gay kiss into Starverse's mid-season, but from the sound of the story she tells about it, it comes off like the person who was supposed to tell her not to do this didn't really feel like arguing that day. And like I said in my video, the moment Disney noticed a hint of backlash, they pulled the episode entirely, but eventually brought it back when people didn't raise enough of a stink about it to make this financially worthwhile. The point is, what you're seeing isn't an industry deciding to promote an ideology or support a cause. It's two studios, both of which employ the same small group of people who are all friends with each other or lovers of each other, we'll get to that, and whose combined numbers aren't enough to fill up an entire room. Letting their guard down and having this tiny handful of people exploit the fact that they're not paying attention to smuggle their propaganda onto the airwaves. And I have a feeling that the moment these studios catch on, or the second one of these cartoons causes enough of a controversy to give them some bad press, the executives up top are going to put a much tighter grip around these people's necks. But getting back to the point. Sugar's stories about how she supposedly forced the studio to let her put a gay kiss on screen are probably a complete falsehood, since if Sugar's supposed influence over the studio is so great, it sure doesn't explain why she wasn't able to stop them that time where everyone on the crew got a massive pay cut, and when Rebecca tried to complain about it, they just told her to fuck off. Okay, but moving on from one fuck up to the next. Since I've already brought her up, let's talk a little bit about Disney's first female showrunner, Darren Napsy of Star vs. Now, in my video, I gave Darren a compliment I am now forced to retract. I said that the art in the show is better than that of Steven Universe because Darren makes her new storyboard artists pass a test to be accepted onto the staff. And that's how it was painted to me in the article I read that was trying to make her look good. But that's not exactly true. See, Napsy doesn't actually do this. I mean, at least not by choice. It's a requirement by Disney TVA for all of their shows. And not only does Nafsi not do that, she doesn't really do anything. If you thought what I said about Ward and Sugar made them sound lazy and useless, Nafsi is all of that, but 10 times worse. Nafsi is so incompetent that after the first season of the show aired, almost everyone who worked there either quit or planned to quit, and the show's directors intended to stage a coup and kick Nafsi out. She was only saved because one of them still liked her and refused to play along, and maybe, much like Sugar, possibly because firing your first female showrunner after one season would have been bad optics. In spite of all of this, and in spite of the fact that Nafsi does literally nothing on the show besides sit in her office and doodle while the storyboarders fuck shit up like they did with Ward, Nafsi has the nerve to make her show even worse by randomly firing people she's angry at for no good reason. Elth Romanellis, for example, who was one of the show's only good artists, got temporarily kicked out for a while because something he said made Nafsi angry, and to this day apparently neither he nor anyone else really knows what exactly that even was. And speaking of Star, it's also worth pointing out that most of the worst parts of the show were, just as I'd suspected, put there by Sabrina Katugo. And much like every other cartoonist currently working in this part of the industry, Sabrina's already been pegged to get her own show just by knowing the right people. The only thing stopping that from happening right now has been that Sabrina insists on making every single character, or at least every single protagonist, in her children's cartoon show a flaming homosexual. And while she could always take her show to Cartoon Network, who have much lower standards, they also pay you a lot less than Disney, and Sabrina's spoiled ass refuses to accept that. Alright, next let's talk about the person who got Nafsi her job. A person she used to go to school with. A person she used to fuck. If you thought what I said so far made the animation industry sound nepotistic, hold on to your asses, because if the industry is incestuous, then Gravity Falls is a family reunion at an Alabama swamp, and Alex Hirsch is the toothless patriarch everyone calls Uncle Dad. Alex Hirsch has fucked everyone. He fucked Nafsi when they were in college, he fucked some cosplayer named Manzi D. Young, got bored, cheated on her with Dana Terrace, promoted Dana Terrace over and over despite her being one of the least experienced people working on Gravity Falls, and when Disney threw money at him to direct DuckTales, he accepted, but then fucked off to Fox anyway and handed the show over to Terrace, who he was already dating at the time. And now, Terrace is also getting her own show, just like Nafsi did. Aside from these two, there are multiple other women he may or may not have slept with and may or may not have advanced the careers thereof afterwards. And what's interesting is that Nafsi said that Tom, the devil character in Star, is a composite of all her exes, so there's some Hirsch in there somewhere. Although, for the record, according to rumor, Nafsi still wants to fuck him. It doesn't end there, by the way, because much like Ward, Hirsch not only hires and promotes his fuck buddies, he also does the same with his friends. He hired his buddy Robertryan Quarry, who spends his workdays sleeping under his desk. He only hired Terrace in the first place because he was asked to by another one of his friends, and then he hired Amelia Lorenz because he was asked to by Terrace. Beyond using the entire industry as his personal casting couch, rumor has it that he even goes so far as to start fights with other people working for or with him if he suspects they might be interested in someone he already plans on screwing. Expanding on this, and this has to be the best part of the video, there's apparently a veritable plague of STDs going around this big happy family. See, almost everyone working at Cartoon Network and Disney TVA allegedly has a venereal disease they got from someone else who's also working there. At one point during our interview, my source illustrated for me the trajectory of a single STI as it hopped across 5 different people working at 3 different shows at 2 different studios that may or may not have originated from a prostitute, and explained to me that at least one person involved in this chain was married to someone else who works there and habitually cheats on their spouse with other co-workers. For decency's sake, I'm leaving their names and the names of some of the other people I was told Hirsch may have slept with out of this video unless something happens in the future that makes this information somehow relevant. but I will say that there is some speculation that Sabrina Katugo is now exclusively dating women because she's mad at her last boyfriend for giving her an STD. So before we finish with Hirsch though, and before any of you get the idea that fucking him is a good idea, you should be warned that aside from everything else, Hirsch is also really weird. One thing about him is that he sleeps at his office, and not because he wants to, but because he can't drive. Instead, he has to use other employees on his shows as his personal chauffeurs. He spends so much time sleeping at his office because of this that one of his girlfriends ended up just breaking up with him, and he got in trouble with Disney at least twice, once for using the trash cans as a toilet because he was too lazy to walk 10 feet to the bathroom, and then a second time for the fact that he brings a laptop to work full of pornography so he can jerk off there at night. And that's pretty much it for individual stories about individual people. The only other things I've been told by my source that I think are worth sharing are that Noel Stevenson used to work as a writer on Wander Over Yonder and was promoted almost immediately from doing that straight to being a showrunner on the She-Ra reboot. So God only knows who she had to fuck to get ahead so fast. And I'm not just saying that because I found another source that used to work in the industry whose name I'm leaving out of this in case they don't want to be involved in all this drama. A source that, among other stories that they publicly share about the industry, not personally to me but on, well, somewhere where I won't disclose, this source said that there was something unseemly, so to speak, about the way that Stevenson got her position at She-Ra, but would not go into exact details. So something was definitely up there. Lastly, I have one more story about Kyle Adam Carosa and his show Mighty Magisword. See, the show got cancelled really quickly and my source told me that that may have something to do with the fact that he's white. Apparently, there was a lot of animosity directed towards him at the studio on account of him being a white guy. Although, to be fair, it should probably be some sort of crime to be as white as Adam Carosa. Aside from that, there are a couple of things I'm keeping to myself until they become relevant. Like a story about Justin Roiland I might save for a future video, and a few people I didn't mention by name because they aren't really big players, so I don't really see a need to share salacious gossip about them until there's a reason for it. So instead, let's talk about some more general problems in the industry. For example, a giant #MeToo style list that has been floating around behind the scenes. After some cartoons were exposed for being pedophiles and sexual harassers, and probably rightly so, a list started circulating among a close circle of like-minded members of the industry where women can add men they believe are sexual predators. Now, concerning as it is that anonymous accusers can slander people with no evidence behind closed doors using this list, I can't complain since I myself have said that I suspect that this industry is overrun with creepy sexual deviants. Rebecca. So I should at least be able to be a little bit forgiving towards this list thing if I were able to give it the benefit of a doubt that it's being used to out actual predators. However, I can't give it that benefit of a doubt because my source revealed to me that it is already being used by members of the progressive clique that's circulating it to smear innocent people as revenge for petty grudges that they're holding against them. Another problem is women in animation. I mean the organization Women in Animation, not, well, maybe a little bit. Anyways, in recent years, the Animators Guild partnered with an organization called Women in Animation, WIA for short. When my source brought them up and their director Margaret Dean, the name immediately rang a bell with me. Margaret Dean, where have I heard that name before? Nah, couldn't be, I thought to myself. So I went to Twitter and scrolled through my timeline just to make sure. And yep, lo and behold, there it was. I'd retweeted an email exchange only a few weeks ago that was posted by a black female animator from Indiana that she'd had with Dean. In it, she asks how this organization is going to help her get a job, seeing as how she pays them their membership fees. Dean answered by spending several months trying to brush her off and then insisting that she needed to move to LA and come to one of their group's social gatherings. Dean ignored every time this woman tried to explain to her that she can't do that and asked what she's even paying them for. Eventually, Dean just told this woman to fuck off. And that was the end of Ouia's amazing support of women of color in the animation industry. But no, there was still something wrong. There was somewhere else I've heard that name. It's impossible, I thought to myself, but I had to be sure. So I go to YouTube and I look up that disastrous trailer of that new animation show that Crunchyroll is producing with the money that they stole from their users. That show that's based on an awful webcomic that's ripping off Little Witch Academia and Madoka. That show with a trailer that doesn't show any actual animation but spends its entire runtime bragging about how diverse the show's staff is because they only hire women, all of whom are, by the way, white. That show that has crazy Kate Leth working on it. And there she was, Margaret Dean, right there in the fucking trailer of High Guardian Spice. Oh my god! Okay, but what does Ouia do that's so bad? Why am I even bringing them up? Am I just being a dick to them for being a women's advocacy group? Yes. I mean, no. The issue with Ouia is that, besides it being a useless organization with a free WordPress site which, much like Crunchyroll, with whom they've partnered, uses their membership fees for purposes other than the ones that they were intended for, like paying Anita Sarkeesian to come to some half-empty event instead of using that money to, let's say, find women jobs. Besides all of that, the problem with them is that they are actively trying to get people fired. Specifically, men. I could get into details about all of the ways that Ouia helps no one and basically embezzles the money that they get paid to buy themselves drinks. And I might just do that at some point when High Guardian Spice comes out and is inevitably a disaster. But for now, them not helping the animation industry isn't the problem as much as them actively trying to hurt it by weakening its unions. You see, after the guild had partnered with Ouia, they had a meeting to announce it with their members. And when someone asked the head of the guild how they planned to meet the organization's goal of a perfect 50-50 split of men and women working in the industry, the head of the guild told them that they're just going to have to fire men. Presumably to be replaced with underqualified women that were given jobs because they're friends with someone at Ouia, as Ouia has been alleged to do. So I'm not really sure how the already weak Animators Guild plans to ever stand up to anyone ever again when one of their members' rights is being violated, when everyone knows that they're a paper tiger that doesn't object to its members losing their jobs. Or how it expects to leverage their already small numbers when the people it depends on for shows of force won't willingly or enthusiastically cooperate with them after they see that their own union that's supposed to protect them will stand idly by as they lose their livelihoods because a group with no power or influence and nothing to offer them in return told them to let them get shit canned. So that's what you'll get if you join Ouia. At best, you'll get your money stolen so that a handful of old whores can use it to throw parties in LA, drink champagne, and finger each other. At worst, your incompetent ass will be given a job you aren't qualified for after Ouia strong-arms the studios to let you have it, where you'll work with equally incompetent co-workers who got there the same way you did and can't do their jobs. You'll work under awful conditions because the group that put you in place is actively working to weaken your union to the point it can no longer help its members. All the while, the money that you paid them to put you in this position is being used to throw parties in LA where a bunch of old whores drink champagne and finger each other. And that's just in relation to women in animation. Let me lay out your future in general if you decide to go work for Cartoon Network or Disney TVA. First, you'll be plucked from your career of posting ugly scribbles on Tumblr to a job as a revisionist at one of these studios, where you'll spend your days getting paid pennies working in an unprofessional work environment. Most of your day will be wasted on petty bickering over what the plot should be, while the person who should be making these calls sleeps in his office. Prepare to have to tolerate people constantly making personal attacks against you over your skin color or not being gay enough, until you're eventually blacklisted for telling Darren Napsy to go fuck herself. At that point, if you want to keep your job, you'll have to pick between two options: either pretending to be trans or sucking Alex Hirsch's cock. If you pick option number 2, you'll get to wear your herpes as a badge of honors, as you are rewarded with your own show and can finally, after working there for less than 1 year, get your own office where you can sleep while your storyboarders bicker like children about the best way to put a gay sex scene into your children's show without the censors catching on. Then, after a long day of tard wrangling a bunch of idiots and fighting off accusations of being a white supremacist for not letting them ruin your show by having the main character join the Communist Party, as you go back to your shitty alley apartment that you can hardly afford because your shitty union can't negotiate for better pay, remember, don't call this a grave. It's the future you chose.